So, in that I have a bunch of Star Wars gear that I purchased while I was down in Disneyland, and my passion for Star Wars kind of came back. And that's weird, isn't it? We've had three movies: Episode 7, 8, and 9. That's 11. I haven't had Episode 11. They're not going to have Episode 11, I wouldn't think. Although, honestly, I think the biggest mistake in buying the rights from George Lucas was making another trilogy. Was staying to, okay, we've got to tell the rest of the Skywalker saga. I agree with people who say the Skywalker story was kind of finished with Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. And so what you're left with is trying to drag out for three more movies a story that I don't think Disney was in the interest of telling. So the original idea from George Lucas, and it's changed. They had an idea that the new trilogy that was to be, which was Episode 7, 8, and 9, would be a cult arising from the ashes of the Empire, which was devoted to Darth Vader, and that it would be to the religion of the Sith and the rise of this evil, and then within this evil something else would be revealed. And then you get into the expanded universe after Empire and Return of the Jedi were done. The expanded universe was kind of dead for about 15 years. And then it came back and people went, oh, okay, Star Wars can be cool again. Because Star Wars was not considered cool when Jedi came out. The Ewoks and various other things made it kind of sort of not cool. So we get the idea of a 7, 8, and 9, and then Lucas comes out and goes, no, I'm going to do the prequels. And we all went, but we know what happens with Darth Vader. We don't need to see Anakin's backstory. That was my reaction. I know that was others' reactions as well. And then we get Phantom Menace, and we go, the hell's a Jar Jar Binks? What the hell is this crap? And yet I still saw it in the theater numerous times because it was a Star Wars movie. And I'd waited so long to see a Star Wars movie. And the movie made a ton of money, which just encouraged them to make more. So Attack of the Clones came out, and it was sort of, okay, well, that's robots fighting with droids. Or droids fighting with clones. Alright. I guess there's something involved in this battle. And then you go to Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin's like, gotta go kill some kids. And they just killed the character in that moment. That, for me, is the moment where Anakin Skywalker, the character, is completely irredeemable, and it ruins the end of Return of the Jedi for me. He killed children because he wanted to save his unborn kid. Right? And it's ridiculous. And he was the strongest with the Force ever, yet he didn't know the woman he was sleeping next to every night was pregnant with twins. He's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And now we look back, and after seeing what Disney's done with it, I see people saying, oh, the prequels were so much better. No, but there's a point. There's a point where I can understand people thinking that. The prequels and the original trilogy, which is Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi, had one vision from one man. When Disney took over, it was the visions of numerous people. And it was under the watchful eye of Kathleen Kennedy, who, I agree with people, is not the right person. So here I am, I'm in Star Wars land, I'm buying Star Wars gear, and I go into this, you have the Star Wars launch bay, which is made up of all of these Star Wars collectibles in the form of these huge models, and it's really, really impressive. And then they have a little store, of course, in one corner. But also they have a video playing. And I hear Kathleen Kennedy, and I'm like, oh. And I really wanted to flip the bird to that television screen in that moment, because she's a lightning rod for all Star Wars fans. And everything she was talking about was inclusion. Force is female. The future's female. Inclusion. I understand the need to have strong women in cinema. I have no problem with that. I understand the need to have inclusion when it comes to minorities in cinema. No problem with that. But it's not the idea behind Star Wars. The original Star Wars movie was criticized for the fact that its cast was all white. And so Lando Calrissian shows up in Empire Strikes Back. And there was more inclusivity in the prequels, where you did see minorities. But it wasn't forced in there. And the way that women were written was good, not great. But the dialogue, George Lucas is terrible at dialogue. And I have said for years that George Lucas, if the prequels, if he had just taken the outlines and just said, here's what I want to do, and handed off the scripts to somebody else, and somebody else had been able to actually change the dialogue to make it, I don't know, sound like the way people talk, you would have had some really good movies. The prequels have good movies in there because it's a singular vision to get you from, we're going to introduce Anakin, he's going to turn into Vader. It doesn't change. What changes throughout in this is Finn, right? So Finn is a stormtrooper. His conscience bothers him. He can't open fire on helpless civilians. That dies. That whole storyline dies. From almost the end of that Force Awakens movie, he's now just a member of the rebellion / resistance. There's nothing about him that's unique or special. And then they get into this, well, he was Force sensitive at the end of it. Okay, so if Finn's Force sensitive, why not have a teaser of that in The Force Awakens? Where Finn is seen on a Star Destroyer and somehow knows he's going to have this moment of doubt, that he's not going to be able to discharge his weapon. He's not going to be able to fire on civilians. And he's weirded out by this, and he's like, man, I don't know, I get this feeling. I get this feeling that today is just, it's going to be one of those days. And I don't know why, I have this feeling. Just have that scene. You've established now that he's Force sensitive. Done. Force sensitivity, never established. So the fact that it comes up towards the end, and then in the most recent movie, the whole time he's like, Rey, I have something to tell you, and then he never tells her. So we're all left going, what? And apparently it was that he was Force sensitive. Well, why have something in the movie that you're not going to explain that's about something that was never explained? So Finn as a character is a giant question mark. Poe. We kind of get a tease in the new movie that Poe had this past that was kind of roguish, and maybe he's like a Han Solo type. But we throw that away in about 10 minutes. It's never established at any point in the previous two movies that ever happened. So it's a reach. The first movie, he's a hotshot fighter pilot. He's the new Wedge Antilles. And then in the middle movie, he's just sort of there to piss off Leia. Right? That's what he does. He basically aggravates Leia. And then he aggravates other people. And then he gets shot. And then everything's kind of stupid. And then he gets out of the cave. And that's kind of Poe. And now in the new movie, he has this whole past they get into, and is really kind of... I'm like, you know what? This would have been a good thing to investigate, I don't know, in the 8th movie. So, my feeling of that is, The Force Awakens should have been here. It should have been movie number 8. Rise of Skywalker should have been movie number 9. Episode 7 should have been, let's introduce all these characters and set up what's going to happen in these movies. Notice I'm including the Emperor. You have to. So you could have started in episode 7 explaining the Emperor's not dead. Now, for people who say, well, that would have been a huge spoiler, they gave it away in the trailer for episode 9. So you have the Emperor's not dead, and you explain the genesis of whatever the hell he had going on, the weird cult following, I don't know, just whatever it is. This whole, I don't know if he willed the Star Destroyers into existence or what it is. He did that in the Expanded Universe. The Expanded Universe, he used his ability with the dark side of the Force to create a huge Super Star Destroyer. So, there's some history there with the Expanded Universe, but that's tenuous compared to what they threw into Rise of Skywalker. Throw Emperor in there. And don't have him in the Force Awakens. Don't even mention him in the Force Awakens. And have the fans going, but we know the Emperor's out there. So, Force Awakens, they're all like, yay! But the Emperor's out there. And then you can do the new 21st century thing. And after the credits, show the Emperor building his army. And then you've got the perfect teaser for Rise of Skywalker. You could even have, at the end of Force Awakens, had the Emperor saying, how's my granddaughter? And then the whole world goes nuts. Right? So you introduce Kylo, you might show his fall from grace. You might show Luke training the Jedi. So you'll have Rey scavenging on her planet. And Luke picking up on some really weird vibes that there's a Jedi out there he needs to go and find. And the Force is telling him he needs to go and find Rey. And maybe he leaves Kylo in charge of the Jedi Order until he comes back. And he's like, hey, Kylo, whatever you do, don't turn to the dark side of the Force. Don't have Knights of Ren. And please, for the love of God, don't listen to that Snoke guy who's been hanging around on the outskirts of our colony here. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to go get this girl. I'll bring her right back. And don't talk to Snoke. So he goes out. First thing Kylo does is go over and talk to Snoke, which is pretty close to Snake. So, he goes over to talk to the snake. And the snake says, you can eat the forbidden fruit. Kylo takes a bite of an apple. Next thing you know, he's slaughtering all the other Jedi. You can have an amazing scene of him fighting with the other Jedi. You could introduce these other Padawans to Luke and where he found them. You could have this whole really rich story while Luke is going out to get Rey. He understands she's strong with the Force. He doesn't understand how. He doesn't understand how there's this connection between he and Rey. So he picks her up, brings her back to find Kylo has just laid waste to the entire Jedi Temple. One Jedi survives. One Padawan survives to explain to Luke what's happened. And that Snoke, who was hanging around and just being a general prick, had already brainwashed him. And then Luke feels really stupid about this. Luke feels like he has been a fool. He didn't see what was going on with Kylo. He could feel Ren from a distance, but he couldn't sense that Ben Solo was being seduced by the dark side of the Force. Kicks himself. It leads to a bad scene between himself and Leia and Han. Leia and Han have a big argument about whether or not Ben should have gone off on this wild adventure with Luke, and they split up. So you've already got them split up before Force Awakens. This movie could exist 5 years before this one. There's a 5-year split between this movie of unknown name and The Force Awakens. So you get into Force Awakens, Kylo is established as the villain. We know Kylo was Ben Solo. So that reveal really isn't a big deal, and they didn't treat it as a big reveal anyways in the movies. Let's be honest. The plot twists in these movies are kind of So just ditch them. Don't have big plot twists. Just have the plot be the twist. So Force Awakens, you have the Starkiller base, which has been created by Snoke. You have no mention of the Emperor, who's creating this army of his own out of the ashes of the Death Star. And you can also explain how he survived the Death Star, because they don't explain it. And what's worse is that when they're promoting Episode 9, they don't even try. They just go, we needed the Emperor. So we went, he's alive. Because, sure he is. Yeah, sure. He's alive. Sure. Okay. He's alive. Ta-da! And it's lazy. Because, again, what the movies lack, and what I'm trying to do with my little outline here is structure. It's not a trilogy if it's not structured. We go back to Lord of the Rings. Everything leads to the next moment, to that next beat in the story. There's no structure to this. So you've got the whole Canto Bite thing with Last Jedi. Where'd that go? That whole gambling thing and everybody profits off war. You should get into who's making money on this. Nope. Rian Johnson came in with his own vision. And Rian Johnson's vision might be interesting. It doesn't feel like Star Wars. So that whole Canto Bite thing and the being able to pick the locks in the bloody Star Destroyer or whatever the hell they were doing doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. You're going to tell me that in that Resistance, they don't have anybody who can code break? Nobody. There's nobody there. These are supposed to be the best, highly trained, And the New Order or First Order, there has to be people who've defected. We always had in Star Wars, in the original trilogy and prequels, you had people defecting from one side to the other. Just have a defector somewhere in that second movie in The Force Awakens who's like, hey, they're going to do this. You know what? That's fine. The tether thing in Rise of Skywalker, again, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. It didn't. They tracked him through hyperspace. Okay. And so why didn't they just hyperspace jump half a light year or something and just jump in front of the ship and just blow it up? It didn't. And then the whole, well, we're just going to go down to that planet and they're going to run interference for us. That's not going to work. At no point is there any plan in Last Jedi that I say, oh, that's a good plan. Nothing. And Rise of Skywalker, the plan is, can you go see if somebody else wants to come help us? Nobody wanted to help us in the last movie. That's okay. J.J. Abrams is writing this one. People will come help us. All right. And then people come and help. In again. So Lando, I don't have on the board because Lando's not a character. Not in the new trilogy. He's not. He's just there. And it's a problem with a lack of foresight. Lando's not established in the first two movies at all. Lando's in the movie because you already killed Han. The actress who played Leia passed away. You killed Luke in the last movie. So, and then you killed Chewie, and then you didn't. And Chewie's dead. The whole idea that, oh, that's a different transport. No, it's not. That's lazy writing. So, Lando, and again, I like these movies. Let me make this clear. I like the new trilogy, but it's not a trilogy. Lando is not a character. He's just there. Just, hi, I'm Lando Calrissian, for the name recognition. And on Star Tours, when I saw him in the little adventure we were doing at Disney, I thought, this is better than what was written for him in the movies, which is the problem. So, Lando goes out to find people to help. Why isn't there a single scene of him going to a planet to find people to help? One of the things that makes the original movies work is the downbeats. And being able to have scenes where you're building up a character, you're building something up, and it doesn't have to be pew, pew, pew all the time. It doesn't have to be these huge, big, cascading scenes. One of the things that makes Mandalorian work, and one of the reasons that we look at it and we go, this is Star Wars, is because there are those downbeats. There are those moments where, and for the younger kids in the generation, the younger generation, they're going to go, this is boring. This is boring. Right. Yeah, it's actual development of a story and actually learning about the history of each character. And I do expect that the next generation will find it kind of boring. But you have to have that so that when you have these big moments of action, they mean something. They have more impact. When I was writing books 10 years ago and thinking that was going to be, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be my job at some point. Please, please, please. And at some point in time, I will actually get them professionally edited and I will actually get them professionally published. That will happen. They exist on online, but they're not great. They haven't been professionally edited. No matter how many times I look at my own work, there's going to be stuff I miss that a professional editor wouldn't. That's just reality. So when I went through and I made those books, I knew I was going to write more than one. And they were based on characters I had written and created 20 years, 25 years before. I had created these characters a long time ago. I had written for these characters many, many times over. I knew them like the back of my hand. Mike Translow, I know Mike Translow. I know what he will say and do in every single situation. John Webster, I know what he will do and say in every single situation. Those are characters I created many, many years ago. I know them well. Mike's wife, Katie Translow, I've known her for just as long. She's just as strong a character. And then when I get into others, which is the bad guy, which is Geyer, and then his son Gora that takes over from Geyer when Geyer's dead. These are characters I know. And I know exactly what their strengths and weaknesses are. I remember when I originally wrote the Into the Void books, and I called it Distant Battles. And I had Gora, the son of Geyer. He had triumphed. I had actually had his forces win, the evil forces win. And he had set foot on the planet that was the launching point for every single good guy battle in all those books. And he set foot on the planet, and I said to myself while I'm writing it, by longhand, mind you, because this is back in the 80s, I didn't have a computer to write on. So writing it out by longhand, and I said, Gora has to die. He set foot on Mike's planet. Now I have to kill him off. I didn't plan them out in advance, and I don't. When I'm writing books, I don't know at the end, or how it will end from where it begins. But I know my characters. And I know how they'll react. I know what needs to happen. And in that moment, I went, okay, he has set foot on what's basically hallowed ground. He shouldn't be there. He can't leave this planet in one piece. He's probably not going to leave it alive. So in that moment, I knew what was going to happen, and I killed him off. It was quite a ways to get there, but I eventually killed him off. Now, when I rewrote the books, that moment didn't happen, but he was still the same character. I still had a set of ground rules with those characters, and I had to stay within those parameters. The new books, they don't do that, right? These movies should feel like those books. These movies, you should go, as a book, does it work? And if as a trilogy of books it wouldn't work. It doesn't work very well as movies. We get obsessed with not wanting things spoiled, right? So the whole idea of who's Snoke, the Emperor, we don't want it spoiled. But we've gone so far into not wanting spoilers that I think it hurts the product. Let's go back to Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings came out decades ago. And yet those movies made a mint. The movies made a ton of money, and we enjoyed them. They were fun. And yet, for most of us, we had already read the book. We already knew what was going to happen. We couldn't wait to see how the voice of Sauron was put on the screen, and then it wasn't. You had to watch the extended edition to hear the voice of Sauron. And even then, they didn't get it right, because these movies were all about Aragorn, which is not what the original book was. But you know what? It was still the same characters, and it's still told basically the same story. A lot less singing and a lot less hobbits, but it still told the same story. There is no Captain Phasma before the movies. There's no Snoke before the movies. Snoke is never explained. Snoke is brought in as this big dastardly character. And I remember watching Force Awakens, this one here, and my wife and I both had the same opinion. Snoke has to be small. In all of these holograms, he's this huge hulking character. He should be about the size of Yoda. And then in The Last Jedi, it's like, he's just a normal size. It's too bad. Because the idea of if his hologram is huge, because in real life, he's very small and fragile and frail, and he's self-conscious about that, that would be a good character development thing. And the idea that maybe he was taking some of the energy from Kylo to keep him alive, which was kind of hinted at, and then, no, we'll just have Kylo kill him. There's no explanation for Snoke. Honestly, if you're writing this as a trilogy, what in the world is the point of Snoke? He's the one that tempts Kylo and turns Kylo. But we don't see it. Han talks about Snoke. And it sounds weird to hear the word Snoke come out of Han's mouth. It sounds unnatural. Sort of like when James Earl Jones said, how's Padme? Where's Padme? Is Padme safe? Is she alive? Didn't sound right to hear James Earl Jones say the word Padme. It was wrong. It was an affront to God. Just saying it. Just throwing it out there. There is no plan for the end. And that's where, when I was in Star Wars land and I'm going through this and I'm experiencing all this with all these actors that are doing all of their parts, and I'm like, these guys really enjoy their job, or they're just really good at hiding they don't enjoy it, but they're really good at their job. And honestly, it's an opportunity missed, because the obsession seems to have been with getting Star Wars going again. Okay, we're gonna have all these new characters. It's gonna be this big adventure. Set up the adventure. Set it up. Tell us why. Give us some background of Phasma and Finn even. Give us the scene of the two of them before they're down on the planet. Finn goes to Phasma and goes, I don't know what's going on, but I have this weird feeling today that something bad's going down. And she's like, just do your job. His response is, but I think something's coming and I don't like it. And then he has that scene on the planet where he can't fire his weapon. And he goes back to her and goes, I saw this in my head. I knew that was going to happen. And then she can turn to him and go, did you fire your weapon? And he doesn't want to answer it. And then you have some tension. And you have actual characters in there then. And you're like, hey, what's going on? And instead, Finn just kind of fades and he's just a regular character for the second and third movie. It doesn't matter that he was a stormtrooper. It really doesn't matter at any point that he was a stormtrooper. Now, just imagine if Obi-Wan Kenobi, if it didn't matter that he was a Jedi. At all. Had nothing to do with the storyline. Han, doesn't matter that he was a smuggler. Can you imagine? It's Millennium Falcon. You have smuggling compartments? No. What did you do? I was a smuggler. Not a smuggler anymore, so we don't have smuggling compartments anymore. And he just never mentions being a smuggler ever again. We don't see that part of his life again. It's an opportunity wasted. And they can't go back. So where they're going from here, there was some talk about whether or not that the girl in the new movie was Lando's daughter. I don't know. Maybe they do a Lando offshoot. I don't think they do. I think it's a bad idea if they do it. I think the smartest thing they can do is create a new character. Don't have Kathleen Kennedy anywhere near it. Create a brand new character. Like, I don't know. Like The Mandalorian. Din Djarin is the most interesting thing about the new Star Wars universe. And I'm including everybody here, and it's a shame. Because the girl that plays Rey in Star Wars Land, you have no way of finding out who they really are or anything. So I can just say the girl that plays Rey, and I know she'll never see this. But holy crap, she was so convincing. So convincing. So good at being Rey that I thought if you had read for the character, you would have got it ahead of Daisy Ridley. At least that's what I think. It just worked. So, Rey should have been a stronger character. And you can't just say we're going to have all these inclusion and diversity and yay, the Force is female and not write strong women. And strong women, it's not about being able to wield a lightsaber. It's not about being the only Jedi. Being a strong female character is about having a backstory and a character and make people give a damn about the character. I like Rey. I do. And I'm frustrated by where I think there's some parts they get the character really, really right, and in other parts I'm like, why? One small detail that drove me insane was she wore white in Force Awakens for the most part. And then in The Last Jedi, she was wearing mostly gray. I thought that's cool. So she's kind of, you're hinting at light, dark side of the Force, and a blend to gray. And then in the new movie, she's back to white. And she was back to wearing basically what she did in the first movie. And I thought that's an opportunity wasted right there. That is an opportunity. They've absolutely destroyed it. And it's too bad. She should have been wearing black. She should have been wearing black. She should go full goth. I don't know. But just have her uncertain. Have her tortured by the fact that the dark side feels easier for her than the light side. And then when you bring in the Emperor, who's been set up here, you might have yourself a great movie. You might have yourself a fantastic movie. That he comes in and goes, this is why you're wearing black. This is why you think the dark side's easier, because you're related to me. You wipe out the 8th movie altogether, as we know it. You bring in a whole new movie before The Force Awakens, and suddenly it feels like a trilogy. Let me know what you guys would have done, how you guys would have done it, that kind of thing, because it's fun to look at. And again, I do like the movies they made. I just look at it and say, I liked them, but oh, they could have been so much more. There's something great that could be done, and I think we're starting to see some of that with what they're doing with TV. And if they stay with TV because the movies get a little too big for them and they're more focused on trying to make money on merchandise and not as much on an actual story with the characters, stay with TV. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will likely talk to you about Star Wars again soon.